Close your eyes, breathe, and let go of the map in your mind. The lines of countries, the dots of cities, the blue veins of rivers with known names. Let them dissolve. Go back to a world before north and south were concepts. Before a mountain was a border, it was just a shape against the sky. Before a river was a boundary, it was just a path of water that deer followed to drink. This was a world of pure geography, a world of presence, not possession, of paths, not roads. The only marks upon the land were the tracks of animals and the faint, meandering footpaths of people who belonged to it, who listened to its whispers. The sky was the only common ceiling. The stories were written in the migrations of caribou, in the bloom of desert flowers after a rare rain, in the slow creep of glaciers. This is the deep, breathing world we are returning to, a world where every horizon held not the known, but the possible. We are going back to the time before the first line was drawn in the sand to say mine, before the first stone was set to mark here. We are returning to the dawn to listen to the world's oldest, softest story, the story of us before we began to write our names upon the earth. The air is thick and warm, smelling of damp earth, of cooling basalt, of a million green things breathing out the day's heat. The sky over the great Rift Valley is a furnace of orange and purple, the sun a molten coin slipping behind a distant escarpment. The land itself is a giant's sculpture, jagged fractures, deep green valleys, volcanic peaks silhouetted like broken teeth. This is the cradle, not a gentle, rocking cradle, but a dynamic, cracking, fiery one. And here, on a plain of volcanic ash, turned to soft clay by a recent shower, a small group of creatures walks. They are not quite apes, not yet fully what we would call human. Their posture is a compromise, spines angled, allowing them to swing from branches if needed, but increasingly upright. This is the revolution, to stand. One of them, a female, pauses. She looks at the ash. The last light of day slants across it, illuminating a series of impressions. The three-toed track of a giant bird, the round, heavy pad of a hippo, and there, beside them, something new. A print with a defined heel, a longitudinal arch, and a forward-pointing big toe. It is a footprint, a hominid footprint. She does not understand its significance, but she feels a strange curiosity. She places her own foot beside it. It is similar, but not the same. She makes her own print. Then she moves on, following the others into the gathering gloom of the acacia trees. Behind her, the twin sets of prints, one older, one new, lie in the ash. A brief rain in the night will fill them with water. The morning sun will bake them hard. Millennia of silt will bury them. They will be found 3.6 million years later, a moment of transition fossilized in stone, the moment the world was first walked upon, one tentative, upright step at a time. The map was not drawn yet, but the first, fragile signature of the map maker had just been pressed into the wet earth of a forgotten afternoon. The world outside is a wall of cold. The wind screams down from glacial peaks, carrying with it the scent of snow and the howls of predators. Inside the mouth of the cave, the dark is absolute, a velvet blackness that feels like a physical pressure. Then a spark, not a flame, but a tiny, desperate ember of orange, struck from a piece of iron pyrite, glancing off a flint core. It falls into a nest of dried moss, and the fluff from a bird's nest. A man, Homo erectus, cups his hands around it and blows. His breath is a warm ghost in the frigid air, a wisp of smoke, acrid and sweet. Then a tiny tongue of flame leaps up. It is a stolen piece of the sun, a piece of the lightning that strikes the distant plains. He feeds it twigs, then larger sticks. The fire crackles to life, pushing back the dark in a dancing, wavering circle of light and heat. This is not for cooking. That discovery is millennia away. This is for defiance. The firelight paints the cave walls with monstrous, moving shadows. But those shadows are safer than the real beasts outside. The fire's heat is a new kind of fur. Its light is a new kind of day, extending the safe hours past sunset. Its crackle and pop drown out the worrying sounds of the night. The family group draws close. They watch the flames, their eyes reflecting the gold. The fear in their bellies unclenches, just a little. They sleep in shifts, one always tending the fire, this new, fragile member of the family that must be fed, protected, and never allowed to die. In that cave, fire ceased to be a terrifying force of nature and became the first technology of comfort. It drew the first true circle of safety, a portable hearth that said, "Here within this light and warmth, we are safe. Here we are home." It was the first human-made star, and under its watch, in the deep, cold dark of a Pleistocene night, the human dream began to grow warmer, brighter, and bolder. The air in the cave is still and heavy, carrying the ancient scent of stone and earth. But today there is a new fragrance, fragile and out of place, the sweet, dusty perfume of flowers. A small group of Neanderthals gathers in a shallow depression they have dug in the cave floor. They are not us, but they are kin. Their brows are heavy, their bodies powerful and compact, built for the brutal cold of the Ice Age. But their movements now are not of brute strength, but of a profound, gentle ceremony. The body of a man lies before them. He was old for his time. His bones show the marks of a hard life, a crippling arm injury, blindness in one eye, a limp that would have made him dependent on the care of others for years. And yet he lived. He was kept alive. Now they prepare to return him to the earth. They place his body in a sleeping position, curled on his side, knees drawn up. Then they begin to cover him, not just with dirt and stones, but with blossoms. Yarrow, with its clusters of tiny white flowers. Cornflower, a startling blue, St. Barnaby's thistle, grape hyacinth. The pollen of these flowers, tens of thousands of years later, will tell the story. They are not just disposing of a corpse. They are tending to a journey. The flowers are not for the living to see, for the cave is dark. They are for him, for his passage, an offering of color, scent, and life to accompany him into the great unknown sleep. This act in Shenadar Cave is a whisper from the deep past. It says, "We feel loss. We honor our dead, even the weak and the broken. We imagine an existence beyond the breath. We seek to make that unknown passage beautiful." In that flower-strewn grave, the concept of an afterlife of ritual, of compassion that transcends utility, is born. It is a testament not to survival of the fittest, but to the survival of the cared for and the deep, mysterious human need to say goodbye with love, even when there are no words. Deep in a cavern in northern Spain, a person stands before a vast, blank wall of limestone, illuminated by a small, flickering lamp burning animal fat. The air is cool, silent, but for the drip of water from ancient stalactites. In their other hand they hold a hollow reed or a bone tube. They have mixed powdered red ochre with water or saliva in a shell. They place the tube against the wall, press their splayed hand firmly around it, and blow. A soft, puffing sound echoes briefly. A cloud of red pigment sprays from the end of the tube, coating the rock. They lift their hand. Left behind is not a picture of an animal, not a symbol of a hunt. It is a negative, a ghostly red silhouette of their own hand, the stone untouched within its outline. The fingers are spread wide, a permanent frozen gesture. This is not a signature. It is something more primal. It is an assertion of presence. I am here. I am human. This is my mark, made by the breath of my body. They do it again and again, in different spots, sometimes overlapping. A chorus of hands. These stencils in El Castillo Cave, some over 40,000 years old, are among the very first human art. They precede the magnificent bulls of Lascaux by millennia. They are not art for art's sake. They are a fundamental statement of identity. The first time a human looked at a blank space and said, with the simplest of gestures, "This is me. I exist. I was in this place." It is the origin point of all self-expression, the moment the inner world of being sought to leave an external trace, a whisper of identity in the eternal dark. The world is a monochrome expanse of white and wind-scoured brown. The steppe stretches to the horizon, a frozen ocean of grass, brittle under a sky the color of iron. The air is so cold it hurts to breathe, each exhale a plume of vapor that instantly crystallizes. The only sound is the endless, moaning sigh of the wind, and beneath it, a deeper, more visceral vibration, the thunder of heavy footfalls. A herd of woolly mammoths moves like shaggy, slow-motion mountains through the glacial dawn. Their thick, cinnamon-colored coats are fringed with ice. Their great, curved tusks sweep the frost from the earth as they walk, searching for buried grasses. They are creatures of mythic scale, embodying the very spirit of the Ice Age magnificent, powerful, utterly oblivious to the small, fur-clad figures watching from the crest of a frozen ridge. These are the hunters. They are not many. Perhaps 10 or 12 men and women, their faces masked by hoods of wolf fur, their eyes narrow slits against the glare. They have been tracking this herd for days, reading the story in the broken snow and massive plate-sized droppings. Their survival for the coming months, the fat, the meat, the ivory, the hide vast enough to cover an entire shelter, depends on this moment. They do not rush. This is not a chase. It is a ritual of patience and precision. They communicate with hand signals, a language of subtle gestures born of a lifetime on the hunt. They have studied the land, chosen a place where a shallow ravine funnels toward a frozen bog. They will not attack the great bulls or the protective matriarchs. They have singled out a younger animal, one that lags slightly at the herd's edge. Now they move, not as a group, but as separate elements of a single organism. Some slide down the slope, circling wide to come upwind, their scent carried away by the relentless gale. Others move to the flanks, holding long, fire-hardened spears tipped with lethally sharp flint points bound with sinew. The lead hunter, a man whose eyes hold the stillness of the frozen land itself, takes a different tool. It is an Otlet the spear thrower, a simple lever of antler that extends the throwing arm's power exponentially. He fits a long, feathered dart into its hook. The herd senses a change. The matriarch lifts her trunk, testing the air. A low rumble passes through them. The moment of vulnerability is closing. The hunter with the Atlat rises from his concealment. In one fluid, practiced motion, he whips the lever forward. The dart flies with a soft whir, not at the body, but at the precise spot behind the young mammoth's shoulder, where the hide is thinnest over the lung. It strikes with a wet thump. The mammoth bellows a sound of surprise and pain that echoes across the tundra. The herd erupts into motion, a rolling earthquake of panic. But the targeted animal stumbles, its coordination failing as the lung begins to fill. The hunt is not over. It now becomes a grim, slow-motion pursuit. The hunters follow the blood trail, a vivid scarlet on the pure white snow. They harry the weakening giant, never getting too close to those flailing tusks, until, hours later, it sinks to its knees and then onto its side, its great sides heaving one last steamy sigh into the cold air. Then comes the silence. The wind still blows. The hunters stand around their colossal prize, not with shouts of triumph, but with a deep, exhausted reverence. This death means life. For weeks their clan will eat, sew warm clothes from its hide, carve tools from its bones, offer stories to its spirit. They touch its coarse fur, feeling the immense life force ebbing away. They give thanks in whispered words to the spirit of the mammoth and the frozen steppe that provided it. The hunt is a pact written in blood and snow, a testament to human courage, ingenuity, and the profound, respectful understanding that, to live, they must partake in the great, unending cycle of life and death on the unforgiving roof of the world. The sound here is eternal, the crash and hiss of surf on a rocky shore, the scream of gulls, the wind singing through strange, twisted trees. This is the coast of Sunda, a vast, now drowned continent that was once the southern edge of Asia. The people here know the sea intimately. They fish from rafts made of lashed logs. They understand currents and tides, but they have always looked east across the water to a horizon that holds nothing but more water, until now. A change has come to the world. The great glaciers have been drinking the ocean, locking its water in miles-thick ice. The sea level has fallen, revealing land bridges, creating new islands, and most crucially, narrowing the gaps between continents. Still, the stretch of open water to the east is daunting. Over 60 miles of the Sahul Shelf separate this known world from a rumored new one. It is a turquoise void, deep and restless. But the signs are irresistible. Flocks of unfamiliar birds fly from the east at dusk. Strange seeds wash up on the tide. The stories told by the oldest elders speak of a dreamland, a place of towering, strange animals and endless forests. The push to go is a compound of curiosity, necessity, and the deep migratory pull that has always been in human feet. They build not a raft, but something more daring, a watercraft. Using stone adzes, they hollow out the trunk of a great tree. They shape it, fire-harden it, caulk its seams with resin and beeswax. It is fragile, but it is sealed. They stock it with gourds of fresh water, smoked fish, bundles of yams and taro shoots, and carefully tended embers in a clay pot buried in sand. The day of departure arrives. The chosen voyagers, a few families, perhaps 24 souls in several boats, push off from the pebble beach. The feeling is terrifying. The solid, known world of forest and stone shrinks behind them. Ahead is only the immense heaving plain of the sea. They paddle with all their strength to clear the breaking waves, then raise a simple sail of woven palm leaves. The wind catches it, and they are committed. For days they are a speck in an azure universe. They navigate by the sun by day, by the rising stars of the Southern Cross by night. They watch the flight of seabirds, follow the lines of drifting debris. They fish from the boat. They bail water constantly. Babies cry. The elders sing songs to keep the fear at bay, songs of the land they have left and the land they dream of finding. Then, on a morning when despair is beginning to creep in like a cold fog, a child points and shrieks. On the horizon, a smudge, not a cloud, but a dark, solid line. As they drift closer, the line resolves into the impossible. A coastline. A coastline with trees unlike any they have ever seen. The smell of land of damp soil, of eucalyptus, of unknown flowers wraps around them like a blessing. They land on a beach of golden sand, tumbling from their boats to kneel and kiss the ground, to drink from a freshwater creek. They have done it. They have crossed the void. They are the first humans to set foot on Sahul, the continent that will one day be called Australia and New Guinea. They have not discovered an empty land. It teems with life, with giant marsupials and flightless birds, but they have discovered a new chapter for humanity. This voyage is the first great leap across open ocean, a triumph of courage, seafaring intuition, and an indomitable will to see what lies beyond the edge of the map, written in the stars and the waves. They have just won a new world, not by conquest, but by the most audacious journey ever dared. In a sheltered overhang, at the edge of the great plains of North America, the only sounds are the whisper of the wind through the pine trees, and the methodical, precise tap-tap of stone on stone. A man sits cross-legged on a hide, a blanket of fine leather chips and dust around him. In his hands is the future of a continent. Before him is a masterwork of lithic engineering, a spear point nearly the length of his hand, fashioned from a piece of glossy, chocolate-brown chert he traveled 8 days to quarry. It is lanceolate, beautifully symmetrical, with concave bases and wickedly sharp edges pressure-flaked to a razor's fineness. But it is not yet complete. For this point to be a Clovis point, it must undergo its defining, most perilous transformation, fluting. He takes a new tool, an antler tine, its tip hardened in fire and polished smooth. He positions the base of the nearly finished point against a sturdy pad of leather on his thigh. He takes a deep, centering breath, for what comes next requires absolute focus. A single mistake, a flex in the wrist, an unseen flaw in the stone's grain, will shatter weeks of work into useless shards. He places the tip of the antler tine precisely at the center of the point's base, with a firm, controlled pressure from his shoulder and chest. Not a strike, but a steady, increasing push he begins to press. The stone groans microscopically. A strain wave travels up the length of the point. His muscles tremble with the tension of controlled force. Then, with a loud, crisp pop, a single, long, elegant flake, the flute shears away from the face of the point, running from the base nearly to its tip. He turns the point over and repeats the process on the other face. When he lifts it, the point is transformed. Down the center of each face runs a shallow, precise channel. These flutes are not decorative. They are functional genius. They allow the point to be hafted securely onto a spear shaft, the channels creating a grip for the binding sinew and a blood groove for the hunt. The tap-tap of its creation is the sound of humanity announcing its arrival as a dominant force in the Americas, armed with a stone symphony of intellect, patience, and ruthless, beautiful purpose. The world is not a vista, but a texture, a trillion leaves in infinite shades of green, filtering the sun into a luminous emerald haze. The air is a warm broth, thick with the scent of damp rot, of unseen flowers, of life and decay locked in perpetual fecund embrace. This is the Amazon, not as a river, but as a universe of interconnected life. And high in the canopy, a man sits perfectly still. He is not a hunter today. He is a listener, a watcher of birds. For his people, the forest is not a collection of trees, but a great living calendar and a map of invisible pathways. The birds are its most eloquent speakers. Their songs and movements tell stories of time, weather, and bounty. He knows them all, the raucous morning chorus of the Oropendila, the liquid fluting song of the musician wren that signals the first rains, the silent, spectral flight of the potu at dusk. But today, he listens for a specific, urgent sound, the sharp, chattering alarm calls of the tanagers and manakins. He has been watching a particular Brazil nut tree for weeks. Its great cannonball-like pods are still green and sealed, hanging like wooden hearts from the highest branches. The nuts inside are a prize of dense protein and fat, but the pods are fortress tough. His people cannot open them. The agouti can. The large, rabbit-sized rodent has teeth strong enough to gnaw through the pod's woody shell. But the agouti is shy, a creature of twilight and shadow. To find where it feeds is a task of supreme indirectness. This is where the birds become his guides. The agouti, when it gnaws, scatters fragments and attracts insects. The birds come to feast on the insects. Their excited, congregating calls are a beacon. He hears it now, a sudden, localized eruption of chirps and trills from a sector of the forest ahead. He moves with a silence that is itself a kind of sound, the soft rustle of a shadow. He finds the spot. On the mossy floor lie the telltale green shards of a gnawed Brazil nut pod. The agouti is gone, but it will be back. And now, the watcher knows the tree it is working on. He does not take the remaining nuts. He marks the tree in his mind, noting its position relative to a towering emergent kapok and a twist of lianas. He will return later with his family. The watcher's skill is not one of extraction, but of interpretation. He reads the forest's social network, the language of birds, the behavior of rodents, the fruiting cycle of trees, to find the pantry. His knowledge is a web of relationships, not a list of resources. In the boundless, trackless green he is never lost, for he is not navigating space, but listening to a conversation that has been going on for 100,000 years, a conversation in which he is a humble, grateful, and supremely attentive participant. The fire is low, a bed of pulsing crimson embers casting a fragile, dancing light on the walls of the rock shelter. Outside, the wind of the late Pleistocene howls, carrying with it the distant, chilling chorus of wolves. The small band of humans huddles closer to the heat, their shadows merging into one great, shifting creature on the stone. Just beyond the circle of firelight, at the very edge where warmth surrenders to cold, a pair of eyes glows. They belong to a wolf, but not like the voices in the night. This one is young, lean from a hard season, and alone. It has been shadowing the human band for days, scavenging the discarded bones and offal from their hunts, drawn by the strange, magnetic promise of the fire and the scent of cooking meat. Tonight, driven by a hunger greater than its fear, it creeps closer. A child, a girl with wide eyes, sees it first. She doesn't cry out. She watches fascinated. The wolf freezes, one paw lifted, ears swiveling forward. Its gaze locks with hers. In that moment there is no predator, no prey. only two intelligent social beings in a silent negotiation across the threshold of light. An elder of the band, a woman with hands gnarled from a lifetime of working stone and hide, follows the child's gaze. She sees the wolf's ribs showing through its thick winter coat. Slowly, without sudden movement, she takes a piece of meat, a tough, gristly scrap not fit for the stew, and tosses it toward the edge of the darkness. It lands halfway between the fire and the wolf with a soft thump. The wolf flinches, then sniffs the air. Hunger wars with millennia of instinctive caution. Minutes pass. Then, in a blur of gray, it darts forward, snatches the scrap, and retreats back into the dark to devour it. The next night, the wolf is closer. This time, the woman places the scrap nearer to the fire. Again, the ritual of tension and reward. Night after night, the distance shrinks. The wolf learns that the strange, upright apes are not a source of danger, but a source of miraculous, reliable food. It learns their rhythms, their smells, the sounds of their voices. Then, one evening, during a vicious snow squall, the woman does something different. As the wolf takes its scrap, she makes a soft, clicking sound with her tongue. The wolf pauses, its head cocked. The sound means nothing in the forest, but here, by the fire, it is a signal of attention, a bridge. Weeks become months. The adolescent wolf is now a fixture, sleeping just outside the fire's warmth, following the band by day at a discreet distance, its keen ears and sharper nose giving early warning of other predators or prey. In return, it is fed, its wounds cleaned, its presence tolerated, then welcomed. One day, during a hunt for reindeer, the wolf's instincts prove decisive. It flushes the game toward the waiting hunters. The success is shared. That night, the wolf is not fed scraps at the edge. It is given a proper share of the kill, inside the circle of light. It lies down, belly full, beside the girl who first saw it. It sighs, a sound of profound contentment. No one declared it tamed. No collar was placed. A pact, silent and profound, had been sealed. The wolf had chosen the fire over the frozen wild. The humans had chosen a keen-eyed ally over a potential threat. In that choice, the wolf began to change. Its snout shortened. Its ears grew softer. Its tail learned to wag. The first dog was not bred. It was invited. It crossed the boundary not of species, but of trust, becoming the first creature to leave the state of nature by choice, to lie by the hearth and weave its destiny forever into the story of humankind. The sun is a hammer on the backs of the people moving through the grass sea. It is late spring in the Levantine corridor, and the world is a symphony of gold and green. The air hums with insects and shimmers with heat. The people whom we call the Natufians are not passing through. They are harvesting. Among them is a woman we will call Sela. Her hands are her genius. In one, she carries a curved sickle, its handle of carved antler set with a gleaming row of tiny razor-sharp flint blades. In the other, a woven basket. She moves with a rhythmic economy, her eyes scanning the wild stands of emmer wheat and barley. She does not take everything. She selects. Her fingers brush the seed heads, feeling for weight and tightness. She avoids the stalks that shatter at a touch, whose seeds are already scattering to the wind. Those plants have failed in their pact with the future. She seeks the ones that hold on, the ones whose seeds cling stubbornly to the rachis, requiring the persuasion of her sickle's slice. Swish, swish. The sound is the heartbeat of the new age. With each sweep of her arm, she gathers a sheaf of stems. The cut grass releases a sweet, dusty, sun-warmed perfume. She lays the sheaves in her basket with care, as if they were the most precious of feathers. This is not mere gathering. It is the first act of a new, slow-motion drama. Agriculture. Sella does not think in those terms. She thinks this stand is good. It yields much. The seeds are fat. I will remember this place. Later, at the semi-permanent settlement of brush and stone huts by the spring, the work continues. Threshing, beating the sheaves to release the grain. Winnowing, tossing the mixture into the afternoon breeze, letting the chaff fly away like golden smoke while the heavier seeds rain down into a hide. It is back-breaking, finger-chafing labor, performed to the chatter of children and the gossip of elders. Sella is also the keeper of the grinding stones. The saddle quern, a large, slightly concave slab of basalt, is her altar. The handstone, smooth from 10,000 passes of her palms, is her tool. S-H-H-K-S-H-K. This is the other great sound of the new life, the sound of patience, the sound of turning the hard, dry promise of the grass sea into the soft, life-sustaining powder of flour. She grinds for hours, her thoughts wandering. She thinks of the gazelle bones stewing in the clay pot over the fire. She thinks of the necklace of dentalium shells from the distant sea that rests against her chest. She thinks of the child sleeping in the shade of the hut, a child who will never know the relentless seasonal wandering of her own grandparents. In her focused selection, in her repetitive grinding, Sella is an unconscious revolutionary. Her hands are performing a magic that will change the planet, the magic of preference. By choosing the seeds that cling, she is silently, generation by generation, directing the evolution of the grasses. They will come to depend on her sickle for propagation, just as her people are coming to depend on them for survival. She is the woman of the wild grasses. She stands at the pivot point of history, one hand on the old world of foraging, the other guiding humanity into the terrifying, fruitful responsibility of staying put, of storing time in granaries, of tying their fate to the life cycle of a few chosen plants. The future, with its cities, its kings, its written laws, is contained in the rhythmic swish of her sickle and the patient shriek of her grinding stones, here at the edge of the whispering golden sea. Here the world is not a sea of grass, but a cathedral of grain. In the cool, mist-wrapped highlands of New Guinea, where clouds snag on jagged peaks and the air tastes of wet moss and rich earth, a different kind of cultivation is being born. It is not under a baking sun, but in a perpetual, gentle twilight, filtered through a million leaves. A man, let us call him, Carl, works not with a sickle, but with a digging stick, a length of hardened wood sharpened by fire and stone. He is not in a field, but in a forest garden, a seemingly wild tangle that his people have subtly, patiently altered over generations. His crop is not a grass, but a tuber, the yam. This is not planting, as one might imagine. Carl does not clear the land. He enhances it. He seeks out a natural opening in the canopy, where light dapples the forest floor. Here, he carefully clears away only the most competitive underbrush, leaving the great trees standing. Their roots hold the steep slopes against the relentless rain. Their canopy protects the soil. With his digging stick, he works the dark volcanic earth, turning it to a soft, friable tilth. He does not plant seeds. He takes a section of a mature yam vine, a piece bearing a fat, promising tuber. He nestles it into the prepared soil, mounding the earth around it. Then he does something extraordinary. He gathers leaves from specific trees, a legume that will fix nitrogen in the soil, an aromatic herb that deters insects, and lays them as a living mulch around the new planting. His work is an act of symbiosis, not domination. He is not creating a farm. He is guiding an ecosystem. He plants taro in the wetter hollows, bananas for quick shade, sugarcane at the edges. He encourages helpful birds by leaving certain fruiting trees. His garden is a layered, perennial masterpiece, yielding food year after year without the need to plow or re-sow. It is an imitation of the forest's own logic, a collaboration with the land so seamless it is almost invisible to an outsider's eye. 10,000 miles from the wheat fields of the Levant, Caro is pioneering another equally profound path into the future. His yam gardens represent arboriculture, a form of agriculture built on trees and perennial plants, not annual grasses. It is sustainable, resilient, and deeply wise. While others will later build empires on the power of grain, the yam tender's legacy is a quieter, greener wisdom that you can feed a people by deepening your partnership with the forest, by learning its secrets and gently tilting its abundance in your favor, without ever breaking its sacred, life-sustaining back. The sound is born not from a voice, but from wind and memory. In a river valley of Central Europe, where mammoths still sometimes trumpet from the misty meadows, a young man sits by a campfire, the bones of the day's hunt beside him. His hands are not idle. He is cleaning the long, straight-wing bone of a griffin vulture. The work is meticulous. With a sharp flint burin, he scrapes the last of the membrane from the hollow interior. He measures the bone against his fingers, then, with a hand drill of wood and sand, he begins to bore. Scritch, scritch, scritch goes the drill, a tiny, persistent sound against the crackle of the fire. One hole, then another, spaced precisely by the width of his fingertips. 5 holes in total. He brings the bone to his lips. He blows, adjusting the angle of his breath, the placement of his fingers. At first there is only airy noise. Then a clear, mournful note emerges, pure and startling in the twilight. He shifts his fingers. The note changes, climbing or falling in a scale that has never been heard before, a scale not given by nature, but invented by a human mind. This is the Divi Babe flute, carved from cave bear bone, or perhaps another like it from whole fells. It is one of the oldest known musical instruments in the world. Its creation is an act of staggering abstraction. The maker saw not just a tool or a talisman in the bone, but a potential for ordered sound. He understood mathematics of resonance, the physics of air columns, long before such concepts had names. That night, as the stars pierce the velvet dark, he plays. The melody is simple, a rising and falling pattern of 5 notes. It is not a hunting signal. It is not a warning. It is something entirely new, music for its own sake. The plaintive, beautiful sound drifts over the sleeping camp. It stirs something in the listeners, a feeling that transcends the daily struggle for survival. It evokes memory, longing, a sense of beauty that has no practical purpose other than to touch the human spirit. The bone flute is a revelation. It proves that before writing, before cities, before metal, humanity had already discovered the need to articulate the inarticulable. That amidst the brutal reality of the Ice Age, we had already begun to commune with the realm of emotion and abstraction, to translate the wind's whisper and the heart's sigh into a deliberate, shared vibration. In that five-note song echoing in a Danube Valley night, the human soul found one of its first and most enduring voices. The cave is a pocket of stillness in a world of wind and predator cries. On the wall, illuminated by the fitful glow of a marrow-burning lamp, a figure sits. It is not an artist painting bison tonight. It is a keeper of time. In her lap is a bone, a rib, perhaps from a reindeer, smoothed from long handling. Its surface is not blank. It is inscribed with a series of marks, not pictures, but something more abstract, a tally. Using a sharp burin of flint, she adds another mark tonight. A short, straight line and a sequence of others. This is her calendar. She is not counting days as we do. She is tracking the moon. Her ancestors and she herself have noticed the relentless, sacred pattern, the sliver of new light, swelling to a pregnant, luminous full circle, then waning back into darkness. This cycle governs the tides of the world, the mating of animals, the flowering of certain plants, the bleeding of women. To know the moon is to have a thread of predictability in a capricious world. Her tallied bone is a sophisticated device. The marks are not uniform. Some are simple lines. Others are crossed or grouped in sets. Scholars millennia later will debate their meaning. Are they notations of lunar phases, of menstrual cycles, of hunting luck? What is clear is the intent. This is a record of observed celestial order. She may be marking the days between a certain phase and the migration of the caribou herd, or the safe period for gathering a potent medicinal root that blooms under a full moon. She runs her fingertips over the marks. Each groove is a memory. This cluster, the hard month when the snows were deep and the game scarce. This long, unbroken sequence, the time of the great salmon run when the river turned silver with life. The bone is more than a calendar. It is the first history book, a chronicle of her people's year written not in words, but in the silent, cumulative grammar of survival. By marking the moon's passage, she is performing the ultimate act of human intelligence, separating herself from the perpetual present. She is remembering the past in an organized way to predict the future. She is building a model of time inside her mind and etching it onto bone to share with others. In this dark cave with a flint tool and a reindeer rib, she is laying the foundation for all future science, agriculture, and religion, all of which begin with the simple, profound act of looking up and asking, what comes next? The coast is a realm of thunder. The Pacific surf explodes against the cliffs of what will one day be called California, a relentless, booming percussion that vibrates in the chest. The people here are masters of the kelp highway, the rich, near-shore ecosystem that provides abundant food. But their gaze is often drawn to the hazy silhouettes on the horizon, the Channel Islands. Reaching them is a problem of physics and courage. The crossing is over 10 kilometers of open, often treacherous, ocean. The mainland provides no trees large enough for a dugout canoe, so they invent a solution from what the sea itself provides. They gather bulrushes, tule, from freshwater estuaries, bundling them into long, buoyant rolls. With ingenious lashings of sinew and plant fiber, they bind these rolls together into a graceful, seaworthy vessel. A tomola plank canoe made not of wood but of woven reeds, sealed with natural tar that washes up on the beach. It is flexible, resilient, and light. Building it is a communal, sacred act, accompanied by songs known only to the Guild of Builders. When it is finished, it is not just a boat. It is a member of the community, blessed and named. The day of the crossing dawns clear and still a rare gift. The crew, paddlers of supreme skill and strength, takes their positions. They push off from the pebbled beach, past the breaking surf. The rhythm begins. The synchronized dip of paddles, the low chant that matches the stroke, the tamal slicing through the swell with a soft, hissing sound. Behind them the mainland shrinks. Ahead the islands grow from smoky illusions into solid land, cliffs, beaches, the cries of countless seabirds. They are not going blindly. They have made this journey before, or their fathers have. They navigate by the swell patterns, by the flight of pelicans, by the taste of the water. They are seeking a specific resource, chert. The islands possess unique, high-quality stone perfect for making the micro-blades that tip their hunting weapons. This journey is for tools. After hours of paddling, they land on a rocky cove. The exchange is not with other people, but with the island itself. They quarry the precious stone. They gather island-specific plants. Perhaps they hunt the dwarf mammoth that lives there. Then they load the tamal and make the return journey, their craft now heavier, riding lower in the water. The journey to the Channel Islands is a feat of Neolithic engineering and navigation. It proves that humanity's urge to explore, to trade, to reach beyond the visible horizon was present long before the age of metals or empires. Using nothing but reeds, stone tools, and accumulated knowledge of wind and wave, these coast dwellers became the world's first open ocean mariners in the Americas, stitching a maritime connection across a formidable blue wilderness thousands of years before the Vikings or the Polynesians. Their tamal is a testament to the fact that innovation is born not from abundance, but from need and a deep, intimate conversation with the materials the world provides. The wind on Wrangel Island is a thing of eternal, bitter fury, screaming in from the Arctic Ocean over a landscape of frozen gravel, brittle moss, and skeletal driftwood. The world has changed. The great continent-spanning steppes, the mammoth's empire, have vanished, drowned by rising seas or overgrown by unfamiliar forests. The mighty herds are gone, their bones bleaching in sunken grasslands, their spirits faded into legend. But here, in this frozen, isolated refuge north of Siberia, one final holdout remains. She is a woolly mammoth, a female. She is small, a dwarfed descendant of her colossal mainland ancestors, an evolutionary echo adapted to this shrinking, insular world. Her coat is matted, her tusks, though curved and proud, are thin from the poor, mineral-scarce forage. She moves with a slow, ponderous dignity, a queen ruling a kingdom of ice and rock, her only subjects the Arctic foxes that dart at the edge of her vision, hoping for scraps that never come. She is the last of her kind. For centuries, perhaps millennia, she has been alone. The memory of the herd, the comforting bulk of her mother, the trumpeting of bulls, the communal warmth of a sea, 100 massive bodies huddled against a blizzard exists now only as a deep cellular ache, a ghost limb sensation of a lost world. She spends her days doing what mammoths have always done, using her tusks to scrape away snow to find the tough, dry tundra grasses, breaking ice from ponds with her great feet, listening to the wind. But the rhythms are off. The seasons feel strange, warmer, and wetter than the stories in her bones tell her they should be. The silence is absolute, broken only by the wind and the distant crack of sea ice. There is no answering rumble, no seismic conversation of her people. One autumn, as the sun abandons the sky for the long polar night, she finds a shallow depression in the lee of a rock. She is terribly tired. The cold, which once merely was, now seeps into her bones in a new, profound way. She lies down, her great head resting on the frozen earth. Her breathing slows. Her eyes, small and wise, close not against the dark, but as if looking inward towards the memory of the endless, golden steppe under a boundless sky filled with the thunder of a million footsteps that were her own. Her massive heart beats its last. The final warmth leaves her body. The snow begins to cover her, a white shroud over the last of the woolly kings. With her passes an entire epoch. The last mammoth is not a tragedy of hunting or cataclysm, but a quiet elegy of ecological change. She was a relic, a living fossil, who outlived her world. Her lonely vigil on that frozen island marks the true, melancholy end of the Pleistocene, the final note of the Ice Age's grand symphony, fading into the endless wind. The mystery is not written on parchment, but in the very genes of a root. The sweet potato, a humble, orange-fleshed tuber, is native to the tropical Americas. Yet, centuries before European sails appeared on the horizon, it was growing in gardens across the remote islands of Polynesia, from Hawaii to New Zealand to Easter Island. How did it get there? The answer lies in the vast, trackless face of the Pacific and the minds of the people who learned to read it. The sweet potato cannot float across an ocean alive. Its journey required a vector, a canoe. Imagine a Polynesian voyaging canoe, a magnificent twin-hulled vessel laden with families, plants, and animals caught in a storm, or simply riding the prevailing currents and winds eastward from the central Polynesian hub. After weeks at sea, land is sighted, not a familiar atoll, but the rugged forested coast of South America. The encounter would have been one of mutual astonishment. For the Polynesians, a continent. For the Americans, seafarers from a world beyond the horizon. Trade would have occurred on those strange beaches, words, gestures, gifts. Among the treasures the Polynesians would have seen were the strange, nourishing tubers. They were cultivators, botanists at heart. They recognized a good food plant. They took cuttings, slips of vine, perhaps even whole tubers, and carefully nurtured them in the damp hull of their canoe for the perilous return voyage west. Against all odds they made it home, and in their gardens they planted the kumara, the name they gave it. It thrived. It was hardy, productive, and grew well in poorer soils than their staple taro. It became a staple, spreading from island to island along the great Polynesian trade and migration networks. The sweet potato's voyage is one of history's greatest silent achievements. It is proof of transoceanic contact between the Americas and Polynesia long before Columbus. It was not an invasion or a colonization, but a single accidental act of botanical exchange. A tuber crossed the world's greatest ocean, not by its own power, but because two of humanity's most brilliant maritime cultures, at the opposite edges of the earth, met for a fleeting moment on a forgotten shore. The sweet potato became a biological ambassador, its presence in Polynesian soil a quiet, enduring testament to the incredible reach of human curiosity and the invisible threads that connected the ancient world. The world here is a study in monochrome and motion. The Ural Mountains are great, gray spines separating continents, their peaks lost in scudding clouds the color of wool. On their western slopes, autumn is not a fade to brown, but a signal. The first sharp frosts silver the lichen, and a deep, ancient instinct stirs in the blood of the reindeer. A man named Arvid hears this signal in the wind. He is not a hunter of reindeer. He is a herder. His people's relationship with the great antlered herds is generations old, a pact of mutual survival written in tracks across the tundra. He stands at the edge of the summer grazing lands, a slender figure against the immense rolling taiga, and lets out a low, guttural call, a sound that is part human, part reindeer, learned from his father and his father's father. In the distance, a sea of brown and white fur shifts. 1,000 heads lift, nostrils flaring, steam pluming from them in the cold air. They know his call. It is the sound of security, of the predictable path. Arvid does not force them. He guides. He and his family move in a slow, deliberate migration with the herd, their lives a mirror of the reindeer's own rhythms. He knows each animal not by name, but by antler pattern, by gait, by temperament. He knows which led cow is most likely to follow the old migratory route, the winter forests in the south. His job is to gently correct her if she strays towards a bog or a patch of land picked clean. He uses trained dogs, not to chase, but to weave and flank, creating a living fence of barks and presence. At night, his family's lavu, a conical tent of reindeer hides, stretched over poles, is pitched near the herd. The air smells of smoky birchwood, drying meat, and the rich, musky scent of the animals. The sound is a symphony of contentment, the soft click-click of reindeer tendons as they move, the crunch of their hooves on frost, the muffled voices of his family, the crackle of the fire. Arvid's herding is the birth of pastoralism. It is a different path from the farmer tied to his field. His wealth walks. His calendar is written in the lichen's growth and the lengthening shadows. He moves with the seasons, a steward of the herd and a student of the land. He represents a middle way between the hunter's total wildness and the farmer's total domestication. He lives in a dynamic partnership, ensuring the herd's survival so that it may ensure his. In the vast, silent emptiness of the north, his quiet calls and patient footsteps trace one of humanity's first sustainable economies, a slow, gentle dance of dependence and care across the roof of the world. Under an Anatolian sun so fierce it seems to bleach the color from the sky itself, lies Lake Tuz, the Salt Lake. It is a blinding alien landscape. In the dry season, the water retreats, leaving behind a vast, cracked plain of pure white that glitters like a shattered mirror under the heavens. The air shimmers with heat and carries a sharp, metallic tang that stings the nostrils. To the people of the nearby hills and river valleys, this place is not a wasteland. It is a treasury. A woman named Elif makes the journey with her kin at the height of summer. They travel at dawn to avoid the worst of the heat, their donkeys laden with empty sacks and wooden tools. The work is brutal. The salt crust is thick and hard. Elif uses a heavy wooden maul to break it into manageable slabs. The sound is a dull, crystalline thwack that echoes across the eerie silence of the lakebed. The slabs are then loaded onto the donkeys, their white dust coating everything skin, hair, clothes in a gritty, desiccating film. But why? Salt is not food. Yet, to Elif, it is more precious than grain. It is preservation. In a world without refrigeration, salt is the difference between a summer bounty and a winter famine. Meat packed in salt will last for months. Fish will not rot. It is also a necessity, a mineral without which the human body fails. And as she has learned, it is a currency. After the gathering, her people will not consume all they have harvested. They will pack the purest crystalline blocks into baskets lined with leaves. Traders from distant settlements, from cultures that have no such salt lake, will come with goods. Obsidian from Cappadocian volcanoes, copper beads from eastern mountains, fine woven cloth from the coast. A single block of Lake 2 salt can buy a handsome blade or a necklace of carnelian. Elif, the salt gatherer, is part of the first commodity economy. Her work transforms a mineral into a medium of exchange, a foundation of complex trade. The glittering white plain is one of the world's first industrial sites, where a resource is systematically extracted and integrated into a growing network of human interdependence. The salt, born from an ancient, evaporated sea, now flows along new human-made current trade routes, preserving food, sealing alliances, and creating wealth, one back-breaking, shimmering slab at a time. In the dripping, primeval pine forests of the Baltic coast, after a great storm, a man walks the shoreline. His eyes are not on the gray, churning sea, but on the rack line, the tangled line of seaweed, driftwood, and treasures the ocean has coughed up. He seeks a specific treasure, a stone that is not a stone. It is warm to the touch, lighter than rock, and when he holds it to the weak northern sun, it glows with a captured honeyed light. This is amber, the petrified resin of ancient trees, washed from the sea floor. Further south, in a sun-baked courtyard in Mycenaean Greece, a prince holds a necklace. The beads are neither gold nor lapis lazuli. They are a deep, translucent gold, warm as sunlight. They came from the north, passed from hand to hand over mountains and down rivers, traded for fine weapons and wine. To him, this electron, as the Greeks call it, is the tears of the sun god, solidified. Between these two men lies not a road, but a pathway of desire. The amber route is not a single trail, but a sprawling, organic network of trails, river fords, and portages. It is an artery of commerce and myth, stretching over 1,500 miles from the Baltic shores to the Mediterranean civilizations. The raw amber, gathered by coastal folk, travels south. In exchange, bronze, glass, wine, and exotic ideas travel north. The journey is one of countless small transactions. A Baltic trader barters a pouch of raw amber nuggets with a river-dwelling middleman for a fine bronze axe. That middleman carries it further, trading it to a hill tribe chief for furs. The chief's son takes it to a great seasonal fair at the Danube crossing, where a professional merchant from the south trades a sealed jar of olive oil and a woven cloak for it. And so it goes, for months, sometimes years, the amber moving slowly towards the luminous civilizations that crave its magic. The amber path proves that even in pre-literate, tribal Europe, the continent was connected. Luxury drove the first globalization. A substance with no practical use, too soft for tools, useless for weapons, became a coveted object of beauty and status, powerful enough to motivate men to traverse a continent. It carried more than wealth. It carried stories. With each trade, tales of the northern Hyperboreans and the southern palaces of gold were exchanged. The amber bead in a Greek tomb is a silent witness to an immense collaborative human effort, a network of trust, curiosity, and greed that stitched the wilds of Europe to the cradles of classical civilization long before the legions marched. Imagine a great campfire, not on a hilltop, but on a land bridge. This is Beringia, the vast grassy plain exposed between Siberia and Alaska during the Ice Age. Around this fire sits a community, a band of perhaps a few dozen souls who have followed the mammoth and the sun eastward into a new world. They share a single language, Its words for river, snow, spear, and grandmother are spoken by all, understood by all. It is the sound of their shared life. Then the world changes. The great ice melts, seas rise. The land bridge drowns, cutting off the new world from the old. And the people, now in the Americas, do what humans have always done. They expand. They follow coastlines, river valleys, mountain passes. One group finds the salmon-rich rivers of the Pacific Northwest and stays. Another pushes into the deserts of the Southwest. Others move into the endless forests of the East or down the spine of the Andes. Generations pass, centuries, millennia. A band that settled in the fog-shrouded redwood forests develops new words for the massive trees, for the sea otters in the kelp beds, for the specific kind of fog that rolls in at dusk. Their pronunciation softens, their grammar simplifies in one way, grows complex in another. 2,000 miles south, in the blistering canyons, their distant cousins' language hardens with glottal stops, adopts words from the people they meet, creates elaborate terms for the shades of desert stone and the phases of drought. After 4,000 years of separation, a descendant of the redwood people and a descendant of the canyon people would meet. They would gesture, smile, try to communicate, but the sounds coming from each other's mouths would be pure music, beautiful and utterly meaningless. The word for water, once the same around that Beringen fire, would have mutated beyond recognition in one tongue, been replaced entirely in another. This is the divergence of languages. It is not the Tower of Babel, a sudden divine curse. It is a slow, inevitable, natural process, like continental drift for the mind. As human groups isolate themselves geographically, their languages drift apart, accumulating changes in sound, meaning, and structure at a steady, measurable rate. The single tongue of the first Americans shattered into hundreds, then thousands, of daughter languages. Athabascan, Algonquian, Quechuan, Tupian, each a unique adaptation to a new landscape and a new way of life, each carrying within its core the ghostly, irretrievable echo of that one original campfire tongue. It is the story of how humanity, as greatest tool speech, proves our shared origin, even as it creates the very walls that seem to divide us. The block of nephrite reached you after a journey longer than any living memory. It was pulled from a freezing river in the western mountains by men who sing to the dragon gods of the earth. It traveled down rivers on rafts, was traded for sacks of the finest rice, and finally was presented to the head of your lineage with solemn ceremony. This is not frustration, but conversation. You ask the stone a question with pressure and rotation. It answers with heat and a slow, gritty yielding. You learn its moods, a hidden seam of crystal here, a change in density there. You must work around them, incorporate them. Then, the carving. The design is inscribed from memory, the sacred face. You have made a bridge, he whispers. It will be placed beside the body of the ancestor in the deep, earth-banked tomb, a lighthouse for his spirit to navigate the dark waters of the other world, a permanent connection between the square, fertile earth of his home and the boundless, circling heavens. The high wind that scourges the mountaintop has a voice, and the old man Caspi believes it speaks in numbers. He sits in the lee of a stone wall, his gnarled fingers moving not with the stiffness of age, but with the deliberate grace of a spider spinning its web. Before him lies his life's work, his memory made physical, the Q-Poo. It is a cascade of chords, a waterfall of dyed cotton and soft camelid wool frozen in mid-air. The main cord is as thick as his thumb, and from it depend dozens of smaller cords, each with its own family of subsidiary strings, a genealogical tree of information. To the untrained eye, it is a beautiful cryptic tapestry. To QSB, it is the breath and bone of the community. This scarlet cord, its knots clustered in groups of 5, is the count of llamas born this season in the high pastures. The deep green one, with knots spaced widely, records the number of sacks of freeze-dried chuno potato stored in the communal granaries against the coming lean months. A yellow cord, tight with complex looping knots, is not a number at all, but a song, the hymn to the mountain spirit. Apu, a melody encoded in thread so that no singer, even after generations, will forget the true rhythm. A young runner, breathless from the climb, brings a message from a valley a day's journey away. The frost took the early quinoa in the terraced field of the sun, the boy recites. QSB nods, his eyes closing. He does not reach for a new chord. Instead, his fingers travel down the main strand, find a particular brown cord, the color of fertile earth. He feels the existing knot's last season's bounty. With a quiet, sorrowful certainty, he unties one single knot from a cluster of 10. The number diminishes. The record is corrected. The loss is now part of the whole. He teaches his granddaughter, who sits at his knee, her small hands clumsy, but eager. The knot, he murmurs, guiding her fingers to tie a perfect overhand loop, is not the number. The space between the knots is the number. The absence holds the meaning. The void counts the things that are. She nods, only half understanding, but her fingers remember the tension of the string. He knows that when he is dust and his voice is gone, these chords will still speak. They will tell future hands how many were fed, how many were born, how many pots of chicha beer were drunk at a festival. They are a memory that exists outside the mind, a story told not in words, but in the silent, tactile language of order, a mathematics of survival, nodded into being against the roaring, forgetful wind. The heat of the day lies thick and heavy over the river basin, a damp blanket that stills the air and hushes the birds. In the cool gloom beneath a great live oak, Muskogee, the seeker, works. His body is painted with the black juice of crushed walnuts, lines and dots mirroring the work before him. The vessel is not clay or stone, but the carapace of a freshwater mussel, a large pearlescent shell. Its interior a palette of moon white and soft, iridescent purple. The pigment is red ochre, mixed with the sticky fat of a bear to make it cling. His brush is a single bristle from a deer's tail, tied to a hollow river reed. He does not paint animals or hunters. He paints the night. He paints what is permanently absent in the day's blinding glare. With the breath held, he places the first dot. It is the unconquered sun, the fixed heart of the night. Around it, with meticulous patience, he creates a shimmering cloud of smaller dots, the council of ancestors who watch from that bright place. Then his hand moves outwards. A long, arcing line of dots becomes the serpent path, the winding course of a celestial river. A tight, buzzing cluster is the swarm of spirits. A perfect, empty circle, painted with a thin line, is the doorway, the place where, on certain nights, the veil thins and dreams walk through into the world. This is not decoration. It is a document. It is a recording of a vision he received during the green corn ceremony, when the smoke of the sacred fire carried his spirit into the upper dark. He saw the arrangement of the heavens as a great living shell, and he understood that their patterns dictated the time for planting, for harvesting, for launching raids against enemy tribes. He is capturing a snapshot of cosmic law. As he works, children creep close, their eyes wide. He does not shoo them away. He points with his stained finger. See this star, the one that blinks like a firefly? That is the watchman. When he stands directly above the council oak, the turtles will lay their eggs. We will have a feast. He connects dots with a faint line. This is the path of the dead. When your time comes, you will follow this road. I am painting it so you will not be lost. When the final dot is placed, he holds the shell up to a sliver of sunlight piercing the oak canopy. The red stars seem to float in the milky interior galaxy. He will not bury this with the dead. He will give it to the beloved woman of the tribe. She will keep it with the other sacred bundles, and on the night before important decisions, she will pour water into the shell, letting the stars swim in the liquid dark. The priests will read their reflections, seeking portents. Muskogee has not just painted a map. He has captured a piece of the night sky and given it to his people to hold, a luminous, portable cosmos in the palm of the hand. The land is not silent. It hums. It vibrates with a low foundational frequency that is felt in the soles of the feet before it is heard by the ears. Old man Jera knows this. His body is a map of cracks and wrinkles that mirror the dry river beds of this red country, and his voice is the sound of wind through sandstone gaps. Tonight, by the glow of a low fire that throws monstrous, dancing shadows of the ghost gum trees against the cliff face, he is not just telling a story. He is performing cartography of the invisible. The children and the uninitiated sit in the outer ring, a dark mass of expectant silence. The firelight catches the whites of their eyes. Jera closes his own. He does not begin with words. He begins with a sound, a deep, rhythmic, guttural vibration that seems to rise not from his throat, but from the earth itself, up through the sandstone he sits upon. It is the sound of the ancestor, the rainbow serpent, stirring in the deep time of the world's creation. Then the words come, not in a conversational tone, but in a rhythmic, chanting cadence that is half song, half incantation. He sings not about the journey, he sings the journey itself. His voice becomes the feet of the wallaby ancestor, Mama. With each phrase, a specific stretch of land is not described, but conjured. And the Mala, his heart heavy from the quarrel, left the cool rock pool. As he sings this line, his right hand traces a specific undulating path in the air, and every listener sees the winding gorge, feels its cool, damp breath. The melody dips and rises with the topography. He sings the digging of a waterhole, a sharp, percussive series of clicks, and stops from the tongue. He sings the throwing of a spear that becomes a ridge of jagged mountains, a long, soaring note that cracks and falls into a series of staccato peaks. He sings the sorrowful pause where Mala looked back, and in that moment of mournful, drawn-out vowel sound, the very air seems to thicken with loss, and they all feel the vast, empty plain behind him. This song is the title deed to reality. Every rock, every creek bend, every ancient, gnarled tree in the country for 5 days' walk is accounted for in the verses. The song is the legal, spiritual, and practical map. To know the song is to know where the water hides in the dry season, where the yams grow fat, where the sacred stones rest. A man lost in this country could save his life by recalling the correct verse. Yara is not entertaining. He is downloading the operating system of the world into the minds of the next generation. His nephew, a young man painted with white ochre, echoes the phrases, his voice younger, stronger, but learning the old, precise cadence. The song is passed on, not written, but woven into the neural pathways of the listeners. As the final verse returns the Mala to the starry sky, the fire pops, sending a shower of sparks upward. The track is now freshly sung, the law reaffirmed. The land and the story are one, and the people are the keepers of the song line that holds it all together. The cold here is different. It is not the clean, sharp cold of the continental steppe, with its endless horizon and screaming winds. This is a damp, isolating cold, a cold that seeps from a gray, forever choppy sea and clings to the stunted tundra of this lonely island. She is massive, a shaggy monument of another age. Her coat, once a rich, dark brown, is patchy and tinged with gray. One long, curving tusk is broken at the tip, a relic of a forgotten challenge. She moves slowly through the low willow thickets, her great, grinding teeth methodically stripping the scarce bark. Her memory is a gallery of ghosts. She remembers, or her body remembers, the feeling of a herd around her, the seismic thunder of 1,000 pairs of feet on frozen earth, the comforting touch of flank against flank in a blizzard, the trumpeting conversations that rolled across the miles of grassland. Here there is only silence, broken by the cry of gulls and the endless whisper of the surf on rocky shores. The others are gone. The calves she bore never lived to see their first spring. The world shrunk, and the great land bridge to the south drowned under rising, hungry seas, leaving this isolated lump of rock as a final shrinking prison. She comes to the northern bluff, as she does every few days, and lifts her head. Her small, deep-set eyes peer across the lead-gray water. The horizon is empty, but in her mind's eye she still sees it, the vast golden sweep of the Beringen Plain, smelling of sage and snow. She can feel its immense space in her bones, a phantom limb of geography. She smells the air, as her ancestors did for millions of years, searching for the scent of others, for the promise of open ground. A storm is gathering. The wind picks up, carrying the salty tang of the sea, a smell she never learned to love. It whips her coarse hair. She emits a low rumble, not a trumpet, but a deep, visceral vibration that travels through the ground and dies against the shore. It is a question without an answer. She turns from the bluff, the weight of her years and her solitude a heavier burden than any glacial ice. She ambles back toward the scant shelter of a rocky overhang. Her footprints, vast as dinner plates, sink deep into the peat. They will freeze overnight, preserving their perfect, tragic detail for millennia, a final signature on an epic that is closing. She is not just an animal dying. She is a world, a way of being, a chapter of the Earth's story flickering out. The age of giants is ending with her, quietly, on an island at the edge of the map, with no one to witness but the indifferent stars. The long winter of her species has come, and there will be no thaw. The Camara did not dream of voyage. It was a creature of the earth, a plump, tuberous heart content to swell in the soft, volcanic soil. Its destiny was written not in stars, but in the tough, fibrous flesh that could withstand a thirst for weeks, and in the wandering heart of the thing that carried it. That thing was a canoe, but not as other lands knew them. Te Matahio e Mandi Ui, the fishhook of Mandi Ui, was a slice of forest transformed into a vessel of destiny. 70 feet of hollowed-out giant kauri log, its sides built up with cleverly fitted planks, sealed with gum and painted with spirals that whispered of deep currents. It carried a microcosm, sleeping platforms, a clay hearth box filled with sand and burning coconut husks, baskets of fermented breadfruit and dried fish, gourds of fresh water, and a carefully tended nursery of shoots, cuttings, and tubers in a bed of damp moss. The navigator, Tupaya, did not look to a star chart. He stood at the stern, feet wide on the trembling deck, and read the ocean as a scholar reads a sacred text. He watched the interplay of swell patterns, born in storms 1,000 miles away. He tasted the slight shift in salinity on the wind. He memorized the precise angle at which specific stars rose and set over particular swells, his mind a living, breathing compass. And he followed the manu, the birds, the long-tailed ghost terns that flew out to fish at dawn and always returned to their unseen land at dusk. He was sailing not across an empty void, but across a woven mat of signs, a living tapestry of pathways, known as the Aramona. For the sweet potato, the world was dark, moist, and jostling. It rested in its bed of moss, feeling the great rhythmic heave of the sea, a sensation so alien it could have been the heartbeat of a leviathan. It felt the occasional spray of cold salt water and the warming touch of the sun when the covering top of cloth was pulled back. It heard the sounds, the creak of lashings, the snap of the pandanus leaf sail, the chanting of the crew to keep time, the sudden shouts when a shoal of mahi-mahi was spotted. Weeks passed. The sea was a relentless blue desert. Doubt, a colder chill than any sea spray, began to creep into the human hearts. Had they missed the thread of the current? Had the star path been forgotten? Their water gourds grew light. Then, at dawn on a day that felt no different, a change rippled through the vessel. Tupaya's voice, cracked from command, rose in a triumphant cry. He pointed not at a line of shore, but at a faint, greenish tinge on the undersides of the clouds on the horizon. The Ritu, the reflection of a lagoon unseen. Soon, the smell of wet earth and flowering plants rode the wind. Finally, a ragged line of green pierced the blue. When the canoe slid onto the white sand of the new shore, the celebration was fierce and tearful, but the true work began. A young woman named Rongo, her hands still shaky from the voyage, gently lifted the sweet potato from its nursery. She carried it to a clearing where the soil was rich and brown. With a digging stick, she made a home in the earth of this new world. She planted the tuber, whispering the chants from her homeland to encourage it to forget the sea, to remember the sun, to multiply. The kumara took root. It sent out vines across the unfamiliar soil, drinking in the rain of a new sky. It flourished. In its silent, vegetative way, it had done the impossible. It had crossed the greatest ocean on earth, borne by the courage of those who could read the language of waves and stars. It was no longer just a food. It was a witness, a survivor, a testament to the greatest exploration the world would ever see. A bridge of life between worlds that the maps said could not exist. The world of Atu was not defined by walls, but by rhythms so deep they were engraved in the marrow of the land and the blood of the beasts. He stood at the edge of the summer grazing grounds, the midnight sun a bloody thumbprint smudged on the northern horizon. The air thrummed with insects and the soft, clicking chorus of 10,000 reindeer tendons. His people, the Sami, did not own the Bozu reindeer. They were intertwined with them, partners in an ancient migratory pact. His grandfather, eyes like chips of river ice, had taught him the language. Not just the calls, the low grunt to gather, the sharp bark to turn, but the deeper tone, reading the tilt of an ear that meant nervousness of wolves, the particular weariness in a cow's eye that signaled she would calve before the next moon, the way the lead bulls tested the wind for the first faint metallic hint of coming winter. Atu's lasso, coiled at his side, was not a tool of control, but of connection, an extension of his arm used only for gentle guidance or healing. The decision to move was not his. It was the herd's. He watched them. For days, a restless energy had been building. The grazing had become less focused. The great stags lifted their heads more frequently, their broad noses flaring. They were remembering a path older than memory. Then, one morning, as a hard frost silvered the ground, the lead cow simply turned her head to the south and began to walk. Not to run, but with a profound, unstoppable deliberation. The herd coalesced around her, a river of antlers and brown fur beginning to flow, and Atu's family moved with them. They struck their lavu tents, their homes of bent birch poles and reindeer hide that could be raised or lowered in an hour. Their belongings were packed onto sleek, strong-sided pack deer. The children, bundled in furs, were placed in woven cradles slung between two gentle does. The migration was a procession, not a stampede. Days were measured in the distance covered by the herd's slow, browsing pace. Nights were spent in the protective circle of the lavu, the herd a living, breathing, snorting wall around them, the stars brilliant and cold in the endless sky. Atu skied ahead on his curved wooden skis, silent as a shadow, to scout the route. He knew the stories of the land, this hill where an ancestor's spirit rested, that lake that never froze because of an underground fire. His navigation was a song of place names, each describing a feature. Hap Stjavari, Black Lake, Gersogai Asa, Whistling Peak. He was not conquering distance, but dancing with it, following the thread of life that was the herd. The relationship was one of mutual survival. The reindeer gave them food, clothing, tools, and purpose. In return, the herders protected them from predators, guided them around treacherous ground, and sang to them the old songs that kept the world in balance. Atu was not a master of the wilderness, but a fluent participant in its oldest conversation. His map was drawn in hoofprints on the tundra, and his compass was the instinctive northward-pulling heart of the deer. The white was blinding. Under the Anatolian sun, Lake Tuz was not a body of water, but a shattered mirror of the sky, a flat, endless plain of crystalline salt that stretched to the hazy, heat-shimmered horizon. Elif's world was reduced to this stark duality: the relentless, copper-blue bowl of the sky and the brilliant, crackling crust of the earth. She walked with her mother and aunts, their figures dark and wavering in the glare, their heads wrapped in linen against the sun. The air itself tasted of salt, a metallic sharpness on the tongue that parched the mouth even as it promised abundance. This was not a place of life, but a place where life paused, extracted its most precious mineral, and retreated. Their tools were simple: wooden scrapers and woven baskets and flat sleds of willow to haul the weight. Elif knelt, the hard salt crunching under her knees. With her scraper, she broke the crust, a satisfying, granular snap. Beneath the top layer, the salt was denser, whiter, pure. She filled her basket with rough chunks, their edges sharp and glittering. The work was slow, hypnotic, and silent, but for the scrape of wood on crystal and the low rhythmic hum of the women's work song, a tune without words meant to keep time and ward off the silence of the dead lake. But this substance, this white gold, was not for them alone. Its magic was in its journey. Back at the seasonal camp on the lake's fertile fringe, the salt would be pounded finer, poured into linen sacks. Then would come the traders, arriving with the autumn winds, men from the forested hills to the north who brought amber and smoked meats, families from the river valleys to the east with patterned textiles and bags of pungent, dried herbs. They would gather at the agreed place, a low tumulus of stones that was neither village nor shrine, but a node of exchange. Elif would watch her grandfather, the Salt Elder, perform the ritual. He would take a pinch of their finest salt and let it trickle onto the tongue of the lead trader from the north. The man's eyes would close, not in prayer, but in profound sensory appreciation. In a world without refrigeration, salt was life. It preserved the autumn slaughter to feed the tribe through winter. It transformed food from mere sustenance to a pleasure. It was a taste of eternity. The trader would then offer a piece of amber, holding it to the sun so its trapped, honeyed light glowed. The barter was not frantic, but a slow, solemn dance of mutual need. A sack of salt for a string of amber beads, 2 sacks for a fine wool cloak, its dyes the color of berries and sky. Elif understood, even as a child, that they were not just trading objects. They were trading landscapes. They were giving away a piece of the blinding, dead lake, and in return receiving the deep northern pine forest, the lush river valley, the distant coast. The salt was a crystal of pure value, a compact, universal language of need that everyone, everywhere, understood. It drew the first faint lines of commerce across the land, lines not of conquest, but of connection, beginning here, in this place where nothing grew, but from which everything could be preserved. The journey began with a storm. A wild, lashing gale tore at the pine forests of the north, and when it subsided, old Bjorn walked the littered shore. The cold, gray Baltic Sea had coughed up its treasures. Among the tangled seaweed and splintered driftwood they glittered, droplets of captured sunlight, tears of ancient trees. Amber. He bet, his joints protesting, and picked up a piece the size of a thrush's egg. It was warm to the touch, unlike the cold stones around it. He held it to the light and saw a miracle, a tiny, perfect mosquito, suspended in mid-buzz for 40 million years, its delicate wings forever unfurled. This piece would never be a simple ornament. It was destined for the path. Burns people were the guardians of the source, the first link in a chain of hands that would span a continent. He worked it gently, grinding it against wet sandstone until it became a smooth, luminous bead, pierced with a bone drill. It held the smoky gold of northern twilight within. The first exchange was with the river people, who came in their log boats when the salmon ran. For a handful of amber beads, they gave fine outer pelts and blocks of treacherous, valuable flint. The river people carried it south to the upland farmers at their seasonal fair. There, the amber was strung beside shells from another distant sea. To the farmers, it was the sun itself made solid, a charm for fertility. They traded grain and sturdy wool for it. From the uplands, the bead passed to the wagoners of the grassy steppe. They were restless, mobile, their ox-drawn carts creaking under hides and bronze ingots. To them, the amber was a piece of the far north, a curiosity of power. They sewed it onto their leather horse harnesses, where it caught the firelight and swung with the rhythm of their travels, carrying it farther south and east than any forest dweller could imagine. Each hand that held it imprinted a story. A warrior buried it with his chieftain, believing its light would guide the dead through the dark. A mother slipped it into her child's amulet to ward off evil spirits. A trader, crossing the high, snowy passes of the Alps, used it as a final desperate barter for food and shelter. The bead was then set in a spiral of gold wire, becoming part of a prince's necklace laid in a stone-lined tomb overlooking a wine-dark sea. Pine-scented shores of one world to the sun-baked olive-grove coasts of another, long before empires ever drew their straight possessive lines across the map. It was not a single night, but a slow unspooling over generations, a drifting apart as imperceptible as the continents themselves. Yet, in the memory of the people, it crystallized around one great campfire in the valley where three rivers met. The gathering of all people happened once in a lifetime when the moon's phases aligned with the migration of the geese. For months, bands had traveled from the foggy coastlines where they harvested shellfish, from the dense inland forests where they tracked the great horned deer, from the high meadows where they collected obsidian like black ice. For a week, it was a festival of reunion. The air was thick with the smell of roasting meat, strange herbs, and the smoke of 100 different fires. Stories were the currency of the gathering. Old Lorca, her face a map of wrinkles from the southern deserts, told of the rainbow serpent who carved the riverbeds with her body. Her hands moved like flowing water, her clicks and tones mimicking the sound of wind over dunes. Young Kale, from the northern pine forests, responded with the tale of the winter wolf, his voice dropping to a guttural growl for the beast, rising to a high, piping whistle for the cunning fox. His words were sharp, staccato, full of hard consonants, like the cracking of ice. At first, it was exhilarating. The children listened wide-eyed, catching perhaps half the meaning, but all the magic. They mimicked the strange sounds, laughing. But as the days wore on, a subtle friction emerged. A misunderstanding over a trade was the word karha, a promise of 3 fine pelts, or an offer of just 1. A disagreement during a joint hunt did the cry toka mean drive the herd left or circle around right. The shared ancient root tongue they all stemmed from was now stretching thin over the vastness of their experiences. The pivotal moment came during the great debate on the moving of the camps. The elders sat in a circle under the vast, starry sky. Jorn of the coast, whose language had grown soft with the rhythms of the waves, argued for following the shoreline, his sentences rolling and fluid. The sea provides without fail, he intoned. Its bounty is the breath of the great turtle, Mara of the mountains, whose words were clipped and direct as the cliffs she climbed countered. The high pass is clear now. The ibex are fat. The stone is there for tools. To stay by the water is to ignore the mountain's call. They were saying similar things, survival, opportunity, but their words, shaped by wind and rock and water, no longer fit together seamlessly. The concepts had diverged. The coast dweller had 5 distinct words for shades of gray in the mist. The mountain dweller had 10 for types of rockfall. The worlds they described were different. As the debate grew more heated, the sounds themselves seemed to clash in the air, to lose meaning and become just noise. A profound weariness settled on the elders. They realized the truth. They were no longer one people who spoke differently. They were becoming different peoples. The unity of the story was breaking into chapters. The next morning they parted not in anger, but in a somber, knowing silence. The coastal band turned west, their speech already softening further with the sigh of the departing tide. The mountain band turned east, their calls growing sharper, echoing off the stones. The children who had played together days before now looked at each other across the widening gap, their shared games already becoming memory, their once intelligible nicknames now just strange, beautiful sounds. It was not a punishment, but a natural branching. The single mighty river of their common tongue had finally diltayed, spilling into 1,000 separate streams, each destined to carve its own course through time. The Tower of Babel was not a structure of brick, but a story of distance, and it was now complete. The sea did not roar with sudden fury. It rose with a terrible, silent patience. For generations, the people of the southern songlines had walked the great land bridge, a corridor of rolling hills and cold grasslands connecting the island to the vast bulk of the north. They traveled it for marriage, for trade of fine ochre and rare shells, to learn new songs for new stars. It was not a bridge to them. It was simply part of the world, the backbone of the South. Then the long melt began. The world, breathing out after an age of ice, exhaled water. The people watched the low places become marshes, then shallow lakes. The salt smell, once distant, grew stronger. The freshwater springs near the bridge's center turned brackish. Elders told of walking to a certain hill to see kin. Now that hill was an island, and the kin were voices on the wind. The last journey was one of desperation, not ceremony. A group had gone north for the great initiation of youths, taking with them the sacred cyclical songs for the emu and the 4 winds. They were delayed by sickness, by a mudslide that blocked a pass. When they finally returned south, clutching the precious knowledge in their minds, they arrived at a shore that should not have existed. Where the gentle, familiar hills should have been, there was a churning, gray strait, a mile of angry, frigid water. The world had been cut in two. On the opposite shore, faint figures moved. Their kin. They could see the smoke of their fires. They shouted until their voices were raw, using the old carrying calls. A reply came, thin and shredded by the wind. They built a huge fire on the beach, a signal of distress and identity. Answering fire bloomed on the far shore, but the water between was a new kind of desert one that could not be crossed. Their canoes were for rivers and quiet bays, for fishing. This new sea was a beast with a different rhythm, its currents deadly, its cold paralyzing. Years turned into generations. The memory of the North became a dreaming story, a time when the heroes could walk to the place of the giant kangaroo. The songs they had brought back became the last gifts, the final update. But songs need renewal, need to be shared across a network to stay alive. Isolated, their world began to subtly shrink. Technologies faded for lack of need or for lack of the specific flint to maintain them. The complex bone tool kits of their ancestors simplified. The knowledge of how to fish for certain deep water species, a knowledge held by the northern clans, was lost, not through forgetfulness, but through the severing of the thread that carried it. They adapted brilliantly to their island prison, knowing its every contour, its every seasonal shift. But a poverty of a different kind set in a poverty of human connection. The great tapestry of stories that covered the continent now had a frayed edge. Their chapter was being written in solitude. They watched the same stars as their northern kin, but the stories they told of them began to diverge, to speak of isolation and longing. The rising seas that had created their island hadn't just changed a coastline. They had performed a quiet, cataclysmic surgery on the family of humanity, leaving one branch too. The soil of the Adena, the alluvial plain between the two great rivers, was not like other soil. It was a gift, a thick, dark, silken mud deposited by the annual tantrums of the Tigris and Euphrates. For generations, Enlil's people had scratched it with digging sticks, sowing barley by hand, their backs a permanent ache under the sun. It was enough, but this year the river's gift had been too generous. The floodwaters receded to reveal a wider, richer expanse of fertile mud than any living elder could remember. Enough was no longer a limit. It was a challenge. Enlil had watched the ox, the mighty aurochs bull they had painstakingly bred for generations to be smaller of horn and larger of shoulder. It was a creature of immense dumb power. He had also studied the forked branch of tamarisk they used to drag seed baskets over soft ground. The idea came to him not in a flash, but as a slow, dawning pressure, like the river itself rising. For weeks he worked, his hands blistered and bleeding. He took the strongest forked branch and, with fire and flint adze, shaped one arm into a long, curved point to share. The other arm he fashioned into a handle. He bound the joint with wet oxhide that shrank and hardened like iron. It was crude, heavy, ugly. The morning he unveiled it, the other villagers gathered in skeptical silence. He harnessed a great ox to the contraption with ropes of woven palm fiber. He took the handles, his knuckles white. With a guttural cry, he urged the beast forward. For a moment, nothing. Then the share bit. It sank into the black soil, not scratching, not piercing, but opening. It peeled back a continuous, damp, fragrant ribbon of earth, turning it over in a neat, rolling wave. A straight, dark line appeared in the wake of the share, a line of profound negation, where no weed grew, a line of pure potential. The silence of the watchers deepened, then broke into a clamor. They saw it instantly. This was not cultivation. It was transformation. That single, straight furrow was a geometrical thought made physical. It spoke of order, of dominion, of future. With this, one man and an ox could do the work of 20 with sticks. The surplus was no longer a hopeful dream. It was a mathematical certainty. But as Enlil walked behind the groaning plow, his feet sinking into the fresh-cut earth, he felt a twin-edged truth. This line he was drawing did more than prepare the soil for grain. It was etching a new concept into the world, the field, a bounded, owned, measured space. This furrow was the first draft of a property line, the ancestor of every wall, every fence, every border that would ever be drawn on a map. He was not just feeding a village. He was inventing the geometry of empire, one straight, irrevocable line at a time. The malachite stone was beautiful, a green, eye-shaped swirl of color they had gathered from the distant mountain for use as pigment. They would grind it on a stone slab, mixing it with fat to paint their bodies for the harvest dance. But this time, during the grinding, a fragment fell into the heart of the hottest part of the cooking fire, a bed of coals fanned by a constant draft. Later, as the fire died, young Kaya was sifting the ashes for usable charcoal. She saw a glint, not of ember, but of something else. She plucked it out with 2 sticks, hissing as it burned her fingers. She dropped it into a bowl of water. There, cool and gleaming, lay a small, misshapen lump. It was not green. It was a color the world had never seen before, a reddish-brown, shining like a wet autumn leaf, like the inside of a bloodstone held to the sun. It was heavy for its size and warm still. It was copper. The village smith Baru, a man who understood the spirits of stone and flame, took the lump with trembling hands. He held it to the light, struck it with a small hammerstone. It did not shatter like flint or crumble like ochre. It dented. It changed shape under force. This was a revelation as profound as the first tool, a stone that could be persuaded. He built a new fire, a careful, controlled furnace of clay and charcoal. He placed more malachite inside with reverence, as if planting a seed. For a day and a night he tended it, feeding the fire, watching for the telltale glow. When he broke the furnace open, there was more of the strange, glowing stuff, pooled in a clay crucible. Using antlered tools, he prodded it while it was hot, folding it, working it. He had an idea. He took a sharp reed and poked a hole through a small, hot blob, then rolled it smooth on a flat stone. What emerged after cooling in the dew was a bead, but it was unlike any bead of shell, bone, or clay. It captured light in a way organic matter could not, holding a sun glow within its ruddy surface. It was cool to the touch, but felt alive. Buru pierced it and strung it on a leather thong. He gave it to Kaya, the finder. When she wore it, the effect was magical. The bead did not just adorn, it transformed. It drew every eye. It spoke of a secret knowledge, a pact with a deeper layer of the earth's heart. It was not merely decorative. It was valuable in a new, abstract way. It required specialized knowledge to create rare materials and controlled fire. It was the world's first luxury good. Soon others wanted beads and rings and small amulets. Buru's status changed. He was no longer just a tool maker, but a smith and alchemist. The copper bead on its thong was a tiny, gleaming herald. It whispered of axes that would never blunt, of vessels that would not break, of crowns that would gleam with captured fire. It was the first soft note of a coming age, the metal age ringing from a simple ornament that proved the very bones of the earth could be melted, shaped, and made to serve the dreams of humanity. The geometry of the land was deliberate. On a vast, crescent-shaped bluff overlooking the slow, round coils of the Mississippi, the earth itself had been reshaped into a symphony of curves and mounds. 6 concentric C-shaped ridges, like a giant's fingerprint, rose from the plain, each broad enough to walk upon. At the center of the plaza, a massive earthen mound, taller than the tallest trees, rose in a single, staggering leap the central axis of a world. This was not a town in any sense other lands would recognize. There were no permanent houses, no fields of corn. For most of the year the site slept, watched over by a caretaker priesthood. But when the Pleiades cluster touched a specific point in the spring sky, the land awakened. From 1,000 miles in every direction, they came. Canoes by the hundreds converged on the rivers, bearing people from the piney woods of the east, the prairies of the west, the cypress swamps of the south, and the great lakes of the north. They came not to trade, not to war, but to participate. For this was the feast of the turning earth, and Poverty Point was its cathedral. The pilgrims brought offerings, copper from the Great Lakes, hammered into effigies of raptors, sheets of sparkling mica from the Appalachians, obsidian from the distant Rockies flaked into mirror-bright knives, and most of all, food, staggering quantities of food. Deer by the hundred, turkeys by the thousand, fish by the ton, smoked and dried. And the medium of exchange, the sacred staple, was not grain, but the humble, nutritious pecan, gathered from the forests in unimaginable bounty and carried in woven sacks. The chief, or more rightly, the master of ceremonies, was not a warrior king. He was the harmonizer. His power lay not in force, but in memory, ritual, and an almost supernatural diplomacy. For days he moved through the teeming, temporary city that sprung up on the ridges, greeting leaders in their own tongues, mediating disputes, directing the flow of gifts. He wore a cape of egret feathers and a headdress of copper and mica that caught the sun like a second dawn. The climax was the feast itself. On the central plaza, before the great mound, long trenches were dug and lined with hot stones. Into them went the combined bounty of a continent. Venison, fish, waterfowl, tubers, nuts, all layered with herbs and steamed under mats of wet clay. The smell was a dense, intoxicating cloud that hung over the entire complex. As the feast was distributed, the harmonizer stood on a platform. He did not speak of conquest or territory. He spoke of balance, of reciprocity, of the debt owed to the earth and the rivers. He reminded them that the copper, the mica, the obsidian were gifts from the land's body, to be honored, not owned. The feast was not a display of his wealth, but a performance of cosmic reciprocity. By sharing the continent's diverse bounty here, at this Axis Mundi, they renewed the bonds that held the world itself together. For a week, languages mingled, marriages were arranged, knowledge of new tool styles and healing plants was exchanged. Then, as swiftly as they came, they departed, carrying with them not just material goods, but a renewed sense of their place in a vast, interconnected whole. Poverty Point left no written records, no empire. It left only earthworks of sublime ambition and the silent testament of exotic stones. It was a monument not to a king, but to an idea that humanity could gather on a continental scale, not for extraction, but for ceremony, a brilliant, fleeting dream of unity expressed in geometry, generosity, and earth. Kieran's world was defined by paths, not perimeters. His mind was a living map of the wadis, the seasonal springs, the migration routes of the gazelle, the hidden stands of wild barley. The great oasis of Jericho had always been a resting point, a place of sweet water and palm shade where many bands might meet, share news, and part ways. Its richness was for all, a gift of the Rift Valley. But something new was growing there, a permanence. Instead of hide tents, people now built round houses of mud brick on stone foundations. They stayed. They planted fig trees and tended patches of grain. They called the place home in a way Kieran, whose home was the horizon, could not fathom. At first it was just a low berm, a ridge of trampled earth and rubble marking where the outermost houses stopped. Then, one season, he returned from following the herds to the north to find them building upon it. Men, women, and children were hauling baskets of earth and stones, piling, tapping, shaping. They were not making a boundary. They were making a barrier, a wall. Kieran stood on a rocky outcrop, his hunting spear limp in his hand, and watched. The rhythm was alien to him. His labor was fluid, a dance with the chase. Theirs was rhythmic, repetitive, collective, a slow, determined stitching of a seam between themselves and the outside. He saw them raise a great circular tower from within the wall, a monstrous stump of stone and mud that dominated the skyline. It spoke not of shelter, but of surveillance, of fear. He approached the bustling edge of the settlement. His cousin, Avi, who had chosen the mud brick life, was hauling a basket. They greeted one another, but a gulf yawned between them. "Why?" Kieran asked, gesturing at the rising wall, his voice tight with confusion. "The lions are few. Other bands are kin, or they pass on. What do you fear?" Avi wiped sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of mud. "It is not just fear, Kieran. It is definition. What is inside is ours, our grain stores. Our ancestors in their pits beneath the floors, our order. Out there," he waved beyond the line, "is chaos. The wind, the strangers, the wild." Kieran looked at the wall, then beyond it, to the shimmering expanse of the open land, the dust devils dancing in the heat, the distant, free-moving shapes of game. He saw not chaos, but life. He saw a prison being built from the inside out. That night he camped alone, beyond the spring's reach, watching the fires of Jericho glitter inside their new stone necklace. The sounds were different now, not just laughter and song, but the clatter of permanent industry, the lowing of penned goats. He understood with a sinking heart that a fundamental schism had occurred. They were no longer just people living differently. They were becoming different kinds of people. He was of the path, they were of the place. The wall was more than stone and mud. It was the physical manifestation of a new idea, us and them. Inside and outside. Kieran, the last hunter, turned his back on the first city and walked into the embracing, unbounded darkness. He carried with him the old, limitless world, now forever shadowed by the silhouette of a wall and a tower. The monsoon rains had turned the alleys between the mud brick houses into shallow, glistening rivers. Young Ravi, perched on a doorstep, watched the water flow, carrying twigs and leaves in miniature voyages. His mother was at the communal oven, baking the day's flatbreads, her hands dusty with fine flour. A lump of the clay used to patch the hearth sat beside him, cool and pliant. His small fingers did not set out to invent anything. They were simply playing, echoing the world. He rolled a piece of clay into a fat sausage, then pinched it into a shape he saw every day, a solid wooden sled used to haul bricks and water jars. It was clumsy. He tried again, thinking of the round, spinning spindle whirl his sister used to make thread. Round things move. He formed two thick discs, pressing his thumb into their centers to make them even. These were the wheels. Then, with intense focus, he fashioned a slender axle from another clay roll and a simple platform. He joined them, the wet clay bonding, with a satisfying smack. For the wheels to turn, they must not stick. With a reed, he carefully hollowed out the center of each wheel a little more and smoothed the ends of the axle. He held his breath and gave it a gentle push. It rolled. Not perfectly, for the clay was uneven and the floor was rough, but it rolled. The two wheels turned in unison, carrying the little platform forward until it bumped against a stone and toppled over. A miracle contained in the palm of his hand. His laughter brought his mother. She wiped her hands on her skirt and knelt, not with admonishment for wasting good clay, but with wonder. She had never seen such a thing. Carts were sleds. Movement was dragging, skidding, labor. This was different. This was motion granted by geometry, a gift of circular symmetry. She picked up the tiny cart. It was a toy, useless for work. Yet, in its simple, rolling form, it contained a seed of immense possibility. She helped him fire it in the ashes at the edge of the oven. The next day, it was a hard, red-brown object of fascination. Other children gathered, pushing it along the baked earth paths. An old potter, summoned by the chatter, examined it. He saw not a toy, but a principle. His mind, trained in the physics of shaping vessels, leaped ahead. He imagined larger wheels, carved from a single piece of wood. He imagined a solid axle fixed to a cart bed, the wheels turning around it. He imagined bulls harnessed not to dragging poles, but to a rolling vehicle that could multiply their strength tenfold. But in this moment, in this sun-drenched, orderly city where no palace towered and no great weapons were stockpiled, the wheel's first incarnation was one of pure, playful utility. It was for carrying, not crushing. It was born from a child's imitation of the world, and a mother's recognition of grace. The wheel would travel west, would be rimmed in metal, would be hooked to chariots of war, becoming an engine of empire and terror. But here, at its dawn in the Indus Valley, it was simply a clever solution, a tiny, perfect revolution in clay, spinning from a child's hand into the stream of time, a promise of ease, long before it became a tool of power. We have explored the wonder of the first bead. Let us now witness the moment the metal escapes ornamentation and becomes tool, the moment the alchemist becomes an engineer. The bead had led to more. Rings, spiral bracelets, small amulets cast in clay molds. But Boru the smith was restless. He spent days staring at the malachite, the green stone, and the strange yielding metal it birthed. He had made beauty. But the spirit in the fire, he felt, was capable of more than beauty. It was capable of will. The idea came from a broken adze. A fine ground stone adze, its half cracked, its cutting edge chipped beyond repair. It had felled trees, shaped canoes, been passed down from Boru's grandfather. As he held the broken pieces, his eyes fell on a small ingot of copper, cooled and waiting. What if the metal could be the edge? The process was not as simple, scaling up. It was a new kind of conversation with the elements. He built a taller, narrower furnace, a chimney of clay to pull a fiercer draft. he used more charcoal, purer ore. For a full day and night, he fed the blaze until the stones around the furnace glowed with a sullen heat. The crucible within held not a handful of ore, but a carefully measured mound. When he broke it open, the sight stole his breath. There, pooled like a piece of the sun fallen to earth, was a molten lake of copper. It shimmered, a viscous orange-white eye looking back at him. With great forked sticks of green wood, he lifted the crucible. His hands shook not from the weight, but from the sacred terror of the act. He had prepared a mold in a flat stone, a simple, shallow groove, in the shape of an adze blade. He tipped the crucible. The metal poured. It was not like water. It was thick, alive, glowing. It filled the groove with a hiss and a spray of sparks, pushing air before it in a wave of heat. It cooled quickly, from sun gold to blood red to a dull, dark brown. When it was cool enough to touch, he cracked the stone mold apart. There it lay, a copper adze blade, rough, pitted from the primitive mold, but unmistakable in its form. He hafted it to a new handle, binding it with wet rawhide that shrank to an iron grip. He took it to a young ash tree. He raised the tool. The first blow was a revelation. The stone adze would have bitten, chipped, required tremendous force. The copper bit deep, and it bent. It deformed, but it did not shatter. Buru stopped, examined the edge. With a few hammer strokes on a smooth rock, he pounded the dent out, resharpened the blade. The metal remembered its shape. It could be healed. This was the second, quieter revolution. The bead was magic. The blade was a new covenant. This material could be damaged and repaired. It could be melted and reborn in a new form. It was not just a substance. It was a cycle. As Buru stood there, the reshaped adze in his hand, he understood that humanity's relationship with the earth had changed forever. They were no longer just shaping its surfaces. They were now reaching into its veins, drawing out its potent, molten blood, and convincing it to take new, willful shapes. The Copper Age had truly begun, not with a shout, but with a determined, resonant thunk of a reshapable edge biting into living wood. The scent of Jericho's oasis was a tapestry Kieran knew by heart, the wet, black earth by the spring, the dusty green of the palms, the dry, peppery smell of wild thyme crushed underfoot. For 40 summers it had been the punctuation in the long sentence of his wanderings. Now the air tasted of mud, straw, and the tang of human sweat in concentrated endeavor. He watched from the limestone bluff he'd used as a lookout since boyhood. Below, the rhythm of the place had changed from the fluid, seasonal pulse of a gathering ground to the persistent, hammering heartbeat of a single organism. The low berm that had once casually marked the edge of habitation was being transformed. Hundreds of figures moved along its length, a line of ants bearing gifts to a queen of earth. Baskets of rubble, of clay, of plaster passed from hand to hand. A new sound rose, not the chatter of a temporary camp, but the focused murmur of project, punctuated by the thud of tamping stones and the calls of overseers. And the tower. It rose from the heart of the settlement like a stone fist, clenched against the sky. It was not a living thing, not a tree or a hill. It was a declaration. Kieran's eyes, trained to trace the subtle arc of a gazelle's leap across a wadi, could not find the logic of its curve. It was mathematics made physical, a weight of intention that seemed to push the very air aside. He descended at dusk, moving with the silent grace that made him a wraith. He found his sister's son, Elam, not at a fire with a roasting haunch, but hefting basket loads of chalk rubble. Elam's muscles, once shaped for the throw of a spear, were now corded for hauling. "You build a cage," Kieran said, his voice low. Elam wiped his brow, leaving a pale streak. "We build a memory, Uncle. The grain from last harvest is in pits inside the wall. The bones of my father are plastered into the floor of our house. My child will be born within that line. Its first sight will not be the open desert, but the face of its mother in a room that belongs to us. The wall holds our story in one place." Kieran looked past him at the rising barrier. A story that cannot breathe becomes a whisper, then silence. The desert tells its story in wind and track, shifting, alive. You are writing yours in stone. Who will you be when the last stone is laid? We will be safe. From what? The lion fears the fire, not the wall. The stranger brings news or passes by. You fear each other. You fear the others you imagine beyond this line you draw in the dirt. Elam's eyes held a new, hard light Kieran didn't recognize, the light of possession. We fear the drought that comes, and the envious eye of those who did not store. The wall says what is inside we have earned. What is outside is not our concern. That night, Kieran did not sleep in the familiar lee of the bluff. He walked. He walked past the spring, past the last scattered stands of wild barley, out into the land of moon shadows and wind. He turned and looked back. Jericho was a hive of firelight, a brilliant, buzzing knot in the vast, dark fabric of the world. The wall was a black suture, stitching the community together while cutting it off. He felt a parting within his own soul. He was not just a man leaving a place. He was an epic walking away from the threshold of the next. His world a world of kinship with the migratory, the shifting, the shared, was receding behind him. Their world a world of accumulation, boundary, and the weight of permanent things was rising from the mud. He shouldered his spear, its flint point gleaming in the starlight, a technology of freedom that now felt suddenly terribly fragile. He turned his face to the trackless dark, carrying the last full breath of the unmapped world within his lungs. The monsoons had gifted the city not just with water, but with a thick, perfect clay. In the wide, clean courtyard between the standardized brick houses, Ravi's discovery ceased to be a solitary marvel and became a communal experiment. The first clay cart, fired to terracotta hardness, was a wonder, but children are rigorous engineers of play. The axle was too thick, the wheels wobbled. A little girl named Chanda, her fingers nimble from threading beads, found that if she made the axle ends perfectly smooth and the holes in the wheels just slightly wider, the roll was truer. An older boy, Jatin, discovered that by adding small pinched lips to the edges of the wheels, they kept their shape better during the firing. Soon a half-dozen tiny carts of various designs zipped and clattered over the smooth, baked earth lanes. The potter, old Vasha, watched from his workshop door. He saw not toys, but a cascade of physical principles being unconsciously tested. Friction, diameter, axial rotation. His mind, which understood the centrifugal force required to throw a symmetrical pot on his wheel, made a profound connection. He summoned the children. With a stick in the dust he drew. He drew a large disc. A wheel for a pot spins around a fixed point, driven by my hands, he said. He then drew 2 discs, connected by a line. But your wheels, they carry the point with them. The axle moves. This This is a different kind of freedom. He brought out his potter's wheel, a heavy stone disc turned on a pivot. This is anchored. It creates vessels to hold things. He pointed to Ravi's cart, now with finely turned wheels Chanda had crafted. That can carry the vessel itself. The entire neighborhood became an open-air workshop. Adults joined, not to direct, but to observe and facilitate. A woodworker examined the fired clay wheels, and with exquisite care, replicated one in a scrap of teak. It was stronger, lighter. A man who crafted sleds for the brick kilns took the wooden wheel and fashioned a stout oak axle. In a week, a cart large enough to carry a sizable water jar sat in the courtyard. They harnessed a docile zebu bull to it. The moment it rolled, laden with a full jar that would have taken 2 men to drag, a profound silence fell. This was not just an improvement. It was a transfiguration of labor. The energy of the beast was no longer spent fighting friction, but converted into smooth, glorious momentum. That evening, as the tropical dusk painted the sky in violets and oranges, the cart stood in the center of the courtyard. It was not locked away. It was a shared artifact, a testament to communal curiosity. Ravi, Chanda, Jatin, the potter, the woodworker, the sled maker, they all sat around it, sharing a meal. The potter spoke, his voice soft. Remember this moment. We have made a tool of ease, a gift to our backs, to our time. Other places and other times they may see this and think, how fast can it carry a warrior? How much rock can it haul for a tomb? They will hear the roll of the wheel and think of power. He placed his hand on the sturdy wooden rim. But here, in this city, its first sound was the laughter of a child. Its first purpose was play. Its first burden was a clay jar, bringing water to a thirsty home. Do not forget, the truest power is not in the wheel itself, but in the choice of what we choose to carry upon it. The cart in the orderly, peaceful city of the Indus Valley remained a tool of community and sustenance. It would be centuries before the concept, traveling down the restless roads of trade and conflict, would be encased in bronze and yoked to the engine of war. Here, at its birth, the wheel rolled forward not with the roar of a chariot, but with the gentle, revolutionary creak of a better way to carry water home. The world is no longer silent, no longer unmarked. The paths we have walked from the volcanic ash of the Rift Valley to the planned streets of the Indus have not been a line of progress, but a vast, shimmering web of adaptation. A tapestry woven from 10,000 choices made in 10,000 dawns. The unmarked world is now a world of stories. Every handprint on a cave wall, every notch on a moon-counting bone, every knot in a quipu, every star painted on a shell is a voice saying, I was here. I saw this. This mattered. The map is not yet drawn in ink and border, but it is being drawn in memory and song, in furrow and foundation, in the sacred geometry of temple mounds and the domestic circles of hearths. The blankness is filled with meaning. It is a world of parting, and thus of profound diversity. The languages have diverged, following the geese and the rivers into new sounds. Tasmanian isolation, the Babel moment by the campfire, the lonely mammoth on her island. These are not tragedies, but the necessary branching of the great human tree. From this parting springs the distinct genius of the reed boat builder and the reindeer herder, the orchid tender in the highlands, and the salt trader on the dead lake. The world is richer for its divisions, for in each isolated valley, on each separate shore, humanity conducted a unique experiment in what it means to be human. We stand on the brink not of better, but of different. The plow's furrow promises surplus, but also invites the idea of ownership and border. The copper bead leads to the axe, a tool that can clear a forest or split a skull. The wall at Jericho offers safety, but demands a definition of other. The child's clay cart contains the seed of the chariot. We have forged the tools of civilization, and with them we have unknowingly forged the tools of all that will follow, the grand and the terrible, the beautiful and the brutal. But in this final moment before the first king inscribes his name on a stone, before the first census is taken, before history becomes the story of states and powers, let us remember the world that made it all possible. Remember the listeners, the watcher of birds, the ones who learned the language of the land, who heard the stories in the wind and the seasons. Their wisdom is the bedrock. Remember the makers, the flint knapper, the potter, the weaver, the smith. Their hands in conversation with earth and fire crafted not just objects, but new possibilities for being. Remember the dreamers, the shaman in the cave, the astronomer in the desert, the singer of the songlines. They looked at the stars, the animals, the very dirt, and saw not just things, but meaning, connection, and a sacred order. This is our shared inheritance, not a map with nations, but a constellation of moments of courage, curiosity, grief, and awe scattered like stars across the long night of prehistory. We are all children of the Great Rift, and of the voyage to Sehu, and of the first dog who chose the fire. We carry the flint knapper's focus, the gardener's patience, the storyteller's fire within us. Now, as the first true dawn of recorded history begins to gild the edges of the eastern mountains, the world holds its breath. The age of anonymous collective genius is gently closing. The age of names, of monuments, of written law is about to begin. But as you drift towards sleep, carry with you not the weight of the empires to come, but the lightness of that unmarked world. Feel the cool volcanic ash under the first bipedal feet. Smell the wood smoke of the first controlled fire. Hear the soft, distant melody of the bone flute on the Danube wind. See the impossible golden thread of the sweet potato's voyage across the star-reflecting sea. The map is about to be drawn, but tonight you have journeyed to the time before, a time of pure becoming, a time when every step was a discovery and every hearth was the center of the world. Let this deep, ancient peace be your guide. The story of us is long, and it is just beginning. Sleep now in the gentle darkness that existed before the first border, under the same stars that guided the very first dreamers. The world is whole. You are home.